Welcome to Unapologetically Sensitive, where you can learn, relate, laugh, and maybe even live a bolder, brighter life. I'm your host, Patricia Young. This is a weekly podcast where we explore the strengths we have because of our sensitivity and some of the challenges it poses as well. The information in this podcast is not a substitute for help from a licensed mental health professional. Hey there. To the creatives, healers, sensitives, and deep thinkers, how are ya? How's your January 2024 going? I think I'm ready for a better year in 2024. Hopefully nothing terrible has happened yet. I'm recording this at the end of December 2023. This episode with Jen, I think, is highly relatable. I think they all are. We had a little blip this morning and we talk about it, and the part of me that felt hurt and the part of Jen that felt defensive, and if we had spoken from those parts as opposed to for those parts. And we talk about what that means during the episode. And something also came up with my husband and my son. I talk about how this impacted my PDA, pathological demand avoidance, or pervasive persistent drive for autonomy, and how I wanted to delete one or two of the polos. I did delete one of the polos that I sent to Jen, and how I wanted to delete the other one because I felt like I didn't have control over her, what feels like to me is honoring what I said and responding to it. But we also talk about how that turns into overfunctioning, overperformance, the way that our love language is and how we show that to other people. But sometimes that ends up being really hurtful to us because we expect other people to show up the same way that we do. And when they don't, it can activate stuff for us. And Jen and I also talk about the wounds that we have. Do they heal? Do they go away? What can be expected? And what happens when we learn to lean into the wounds that we have and just expect them to show up, expect to have miscommunication, expect to have rupture and repair, as opposed to feeling thrown by it every time it happens. And just being really I've just been really hard on myself. And I don't feel great about that. I've been really out of balance. And we talk about I'm not filling up my own life with me right now. And so that is making me feel much more sensitive to things that are going on. I think the holidays throw us off, getting off balance, not centering on ourselves because of everything else that goes on. I can't imagine that at least one of you listening can't relate to some or part of this episode. I think that's all I have. And now on to the show. Hey, Jen, how are you?
Hi, Patricia. How am I? Not too far different than when we last recorded. Just trying to be gentle and take deep breaths and rest this quiet time of the year.
Yeah.
But still cheerful, I guess I could say. But oof, yeah, just tired, I guess. How are you, my dear?
Pretty much the same as when we talked last time, except the dizziness. So the good news is the dizziness has been taken care of. I did wake up with a headache this morning, and it feels like it could be the beginning of a migraine. But yeah, just feels like it's a really hard time and there's a lot going on. And I suspect too that I haven't been back to the pool. I haven't been paddling. I'm back to eating all the foods that really don't work for me. And it's really impacting my mood. It seems like my attachment injuries and I'm wondering, is it my attachment injuries or is it my PDA or is it a combination of both? I don't know. For me, it's very important through this new lens of having an autism diagnosis to understand what it is, because that really helps me to reframe it.
Maybe looking at it through both lenses, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I know we do go in and out. I know I do. And I've been mostly out of when you're really taking good care of yourself. And I know one thing that I reflected back to you the other day was you are only 2 weeks and a couple days out of a pretty significant illness.
Yeah.
Acute, right? And I'm so glad that you're feeling better, and just kind of want to be gentle with your headache. It's like bunny slippers time in my life.
Yeah.
So you'll get back there.
It's been hard. I feel like, thank you. And I sort of know that, but I'll tell you, my self-criticism and self-judgment has just been really high. The gift is that you and my friend Jean and the people around me are reflecting back to me that this is temporary and I will get back there. Ooh, I'm feeling tearful. And I think just because I've been so out of balance all the way around, and I know that exercise, and I don't look at it as exercise in terms of losing weight. I look at it as this helps me regulate my system. It discharges energy. It helps to calm me. And I know that certain foods just don't work with me. And with the holidays, I know I'm not alone with this. I've been talking to lots of people that are wanting to kind of get back on track and have stuff in the house that doesn't work for them. So I know that this is not a thing that's unique to me, but having all this come together at the same time. And it's been almost 3 weeks and I haven't even driven my car. I think I'm okay to drive, but we'll talk a little bit more about this, but it just feels like it's a really tough time. And what is different is I've been staying connected. I've been talking about it and not withdrawing and not isolating and having to work through some difficult things. But I'll tell you, since I've really been thinking about this, I'm grateful that I know that I'm autistic. I'm privileged in that I was able to get a formal diagnosis. Self-diagnosis is valid. I do have these moments of thinking like, would it be easier if I just knew that I wasn't autistic? Because I feel so flippin' autistic and seeing so much more of what goes on and connecting it to my autism. And what I really believe is if I didn't have a name for it or a label, I'd still be struggling and suffering. I'd just be calling it something else and probably sublimating the things that are going on, and it would be coming out somatically or with other things. So I really, there's a part of me that wants to like go back to before and put my head under the covers or bury my head in the sand and say like, well, it was better before I knew what it was. The reality is I've struggled and suffered throughout my whole life. I've gone on disability twice in my life because I just got so overwhelmed. I thought it was depression. In retrospect, I'm convinced it was autistic burnout. I took a break from the podcast because I'm sure that was autistic burnout. So it's not like these things didn't exist. Like if I go like, it's not autism, it's like, well, something was going on and I have hard evidence of that.
Yeah.
But I think that this is part of what happens when we get a new diagnosis that for you, if you're HSP, if you're autistic, you look back over your life through this new lens to reassess what happened through having new information. And I'll tell you, it's not always fun and it's not always easy. And I suspect that especially this first year, this is the first holiday I've gone through with really feeling very clear that I'm autistic and seeing how this impacts me, having family and people in our home, having food in our home, having my routines changed, being sick, not being able to drive, losing my independence and autonomy. It's a lot.
It is a lot. It really is. And I'm glad you're still showing up and that you and I are still connecting. I know I can join with you in that not going dark, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think there's a certain part of giving up perfectionism and not feeling shame that allows us to show up so imperfectly. And I think one of the fundamental things for me anyway, personally, to be able to show up with myself with gentleness, and that includes gentleness of the inner critic, is kind of, and I think I've said this before, but it's kind of like assuming that we're like houseplants and we're going to dry out and need water. Like balance is not a static state. Like I will, in my future, experience panic attacks again because I get them. I'll experience another period of burnout and I'll add whatever I've added to my repertoire nowadays. This past one, I think I was joking. It was like part of the recovery was giving myself permission to use paper plates. It's just so I wasn't feeling quite so bogged down when I wasn't functioning as I do standardly. But it's the gentleness and it's the assumption that we're going to dry out. It's the assumption that we're not, the reverse assumption is that, oh, what's wrong with you? If,
Right.
like it's like fighting with physics. It's like fighting with gravity.
Right.
No one would have a house plant and just expect that it's going to maintain its own water.
Right.
And we shouldn't do that about ourselves either.
Right.
And I know that's helped me more quickly access a level of self-compassion that while I still have to walk my walk and go through it and puzzle and cry, and makes it easier to connect because I'm not so ashamed, but just embracing that worldview. And that has many, many, many applications in friendship, in connection. I assume we're going to miscommunicate.
Mm-hmm.
Or I assume something I do is going to trigger an attachment wound in someone else. And that something they do is going to trigger an attachment wound in me because I'm wounded and that's just part of my story.
Yeah.
Knowing better how to not being so upset that that happens, like accepting ruptures and then getting really, really good at repairs instead of falling to pieces every time ruptures happen, because our perfectionism would say that they shouldn't happen.
Right.
Well, I thought I had nothing to say today. I'm just laughing at myself because I got on before we hit record. I was like, Patricia, I have nothing to say today.
I'm like, it's okay. I got a lot. Well, I think what happens is I'm confident that if you're listening to this podcast, either you're neurodivergent or somebody that you love or care about is neurodivergent. And what we do is we have this bar without even realizing that we keep thinking we're supposed to reach the 100% and be like every other neurotypical. And every time we fall short of it, we feel terrible. And I think that when we can lower the bar to where there's no standard and just accept, this is essentially what you just said. It's just a different way of conceptualizing it. And we just accept that this is part of what's going to happen, that when it happens, we're okay with that. And then we can move from that zero baseline up, as opposed to always measuring how short we're falling of that top bar of 100%, where we never feel good enough. And I had expected the dizziness to get better. If you haven't been listening or you're listening for the first time, I had vestibular neuritis, which meant that the world was spinning and I'd get up and was very dizzy. And I sometimes just had to sit with my eyes closed because it was awful. And I expected it to get better and it didn't as quickly as I thought. And that was just really frightening to me. And then the ENT said it could be 2 to 3 months before I'm back to my baseline, which initially was incredibly, incredibly discouraging. But then I started to just lean into the dizziness and get curious. I was kind of surprised, like the ENT said that is the spinning going one way or the other. And like I never paid attention to it. So I started getting curious. And if I sleep on one side and I roll to the other side, do I get dizzy? If I roll from that side to the other, I just started really getting curious and paying attention to it and noticing what happened, and then started to move my head when it happened to see, like, does that activate dizziness? So I just started to accept that this may be here on and off for a while. So how can I lean into it? And then it didn't feel as distressing, because I'll tell you, initially, the dizziness just felt like it was undoing. It was so bad that my husband was next to me. I would need to put my hand on his leg because it felt like I was just spinning through space and there was nothing to tether or ground me. And that just touching him felt like, okay, I'm spinning out of control, but there is somebody sitting next to me. So whatever it is that you're struggling with, and my guess is it's not dizziness, but whatever it is that you're struggling with, is there a way that you can lean into it and be more okay with it? Do you love it? Do you want it? Would you choose it? Of course not. But the reality is we have this stuff that goes on and it's going to come up for us. And we often forget. We talked about a while ago that I was just going to expect to be disappointed 5 times a day, because I'd get disappointed and then it would really throw me. And then I kind of forgot. And this morning it was a hard morning. And I didn't even know that this was going on, that you and I FaceTimed yesterday. I think we FaceTimed twice. Mm-hmm. We texted, so it's not like we haven't been in touch, but I left a polo for you, I think yesterday morning. And when you left a Marco Polo for me this morning, you didn't mention my polo. I didn't realize I had an expectation, but it really activated something for me. And I sent a polo back, and I said I was having some feelings about it. And then I felt bad about doing that. And I deleted the polo because I go into anger. I don't feel seen and heard. And then I go into shame because I don't want to lose a friendship because I keep having what feels like unrealistic demands. And I'll let you talk, and I'll let you talk eventually.
You keep going. I'm good.
But we talked about the parts of you that come up, which I'm really happy and open to hearing, but I speak to those parts too. Am I ever going to be satisfied? Am I ever going to not have expectations and disappointments in a friendship? I know you're here for me. We FaceTimed twice yesterday. You're here for me if I need you. How come this stuff keeps getting activated? I know that you have a lot going on in your life. So I see things from both perspectives. I think part of that is my high empathy. I think part of that is also my PDA trying to manage what goes on for me, and then navigating the anger and hurt that I feel, and then this fear and shame that you're going to get angry with me. I mean, it's a lot.
It is a lot. Welcome to being human.
I know.
I think one of the things, you and I have the friendship where there's space for that and there's understanding of that. And we've both been through grad school and have advanced training as therapists and have clocked in, I should really look back, like how many hours of being in that seat, right?
Yeah.
Which is a blessing and a curse, as I'm discovering in my personal life,
Mm-hmm.
because there have been numerous times in my personal life, not professional life, where it's like you have so many hours clocked in as a therapist of being so understanding of where other people are at, empathic and understanding them, and maybe to the detriment of some of my other roles. I know I've talked about this a little bit on the podcast before, but I've worked in schools before. I've been a school counselor, and then I had to be at a meeting with a school counselor and a dean because my child was being bullied, and realized about, I don't know, it probably took a good 10 or 15 minutes into the meeting that my kid didn't have Mama Bear present. And that's when I let all of that. In some ways, it's a lot of rules. I know how to act. And whereas Mama Bear energy felt a lot more intense and unruly and less rule bound, I should say. I know that for me to be able to, in a well chaperoned, but speak to the parts of me. So when you and I have these, speaking in parts is really, really helpful. And I think I laughed this morning a little bit because I was like, wow, we weren't speaking for our parts. We were just speaking from our parts. Like, I think we have really young, injured parts that could have like a cage match and could make a mess. And this is where like rupture versus, and we'd have to repair, like we'd have to clean up from that and understand each other's point of view. And like, I think we're front loading a lot of that, and we have plenty of good space for each other. And just being able to state the feelings and make space for them. And I had some live feelings today. I mean, when you were telling me this, I also teared up, and you can feel the emotions swell. And I think they just need to be honored and felt. And the same curiosity you're talking about, I love that, by the way. I think that's such a healthy stance, whether it's leaning into dizziness or being curious about anything. I know with clients, I'll describe it like almost like being an alien, like an alien was dropped into a human body, and it's like, oh, this is what it's like to be a 50-year-old woman who's feeling this about something. And it's like you're taking notes back to the mothership to describe what this experience is like. And if you can bring that kind of playfulness and wonder to any experience, it really sort of sidesteps some of the other stuff we can get into that's not all that helpful. I'll just say that. And I realize I'm kind of going all over the place right now. It is something that I treasure in our friendship, and I'm glad that we have this channel open. And I think one of the things that I'm learning is just to say it. So it's not an expectation that comes from nowhere. Our pattern on Polo is to reference the previous Polo and things that were said. And there are plenty of times where I'm like, oh gosh, I listened to your Polo yesterday. I can't remember anything. I should probably go rewatch it. If there's anything I'm not commenting on that you would like me to comment on, please let me know. And you usually say, oh no, don't bother rewatching it. We can talk about it now. 24 hours had gone by. We had been in contact via FaceTime. So I didn't even do that though. I didn't even make any of those references. And I think that, I see how that broke the pattern and was disappointing. I'm also trying to hold a gentle space for me that I know I'm here for you. I know I'm a good friend. I know I joked a little bit, and I think that's what got me tearful is a lot of my life history has this theme of disappointing people, important people in my life, especially as a child. I'm trying to release myself from, right? And so being able to hold space for your disappointment without taking it overly personally, but validating that I didn't show up the way I'm used to. And if you have young parts that don't like that, I get that. I don't know. My experience this morning was that it was really beautiful to be able to hold space. I was also able to articulate that there are moments when I need to, I can feel the self-defensive parts of me show up. And while I don't want them to take over, because I do think that they can be pretty destructive, and I wanted to be here for you, they are the parts that also have wisdom and have some information and also need to be honored.
Absolutely. I just want to clarify, and either you can do it or I can do it, but can you talk a little bit about what it means if you speak for your parts versus from your parts? Or I'm happy to do it. It doesn't matter.
No, I mean, I just did this the other day with a, really difficult conversation with someone that, important who's in my life that I'm trying very hard to be there for and be compassionate with. And I had to say to them that, look, I would be remiss and I wouldn't be being true to myself if I didn't speak for a part of me that's really angry with you right now. And just honoring that part. And that's, really disappointed. And we can get more into that when it's my turn, and maybe next conversation, because this conversation, we were really concerned with some of the things that are going on in their life. So speaking from a part basically is this part of you has full control of your body. You're thinking all that part's thoughts, feeling all that part's feelings, and you are coming from that part. So if you and I are in a fight, and this is hypothetical, this is just illustrative, right? Like if we're having an argument and I am like, I have a part that really wants to smack you right now, that is speaking for a part.
Right.
If I were speaking from a part, I'd have smacked you. So not that I condone violence in any way, but it's like, that's the sensation of it. Like when I can speak for a part from my children, hey, I'm really disappointed that blah, 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 you didn't do your chores, versus when I'm, in that mom rage where I'm like, you're disrespecting me. You're not doing your chore. Like then I'm thinking all that part's thoughts, having all that part's feelings, and I'm deep in it. And I'm just coming from that part instead of being able to take a deep breath, take a step back and speak for a part of me that often has very important information to relay.
Well, and when we speak from that part, that's when we say things like, you're a loser. I can't ever count on you. You let me down. You always do this. That it's usually very blaming behavior. It's usually all or nothing. Not always, but it very much is that, as opposed to saying there's a part of me that feels like I can't count on you. And there's a part of me that feels like, as opposed to saying you always do this, you're never here for me.
Well, and the wisdom of that part, and I think you and I have, that's the part that I believe you spoke about this a couple of podcasts ago with some other thing that we came up when we were doing like therapy, like live online, I feel like with each other sometimes in real life. And it's fascinating to me. It's been such a beautiful opportunity for growth and reflection, and some of it painful self-reflection. But to me, that part, while I don't want to let it fly out of my mouth because it can be cruel and it can be very biting and it is very one-sided, it's only the perspective of that part. It's like all the other parts go to sleep with their perspectives that are perhaps a little more generous in that moment, or even more joining, like, because haven't we all had those moments, right? But that doesn't mean that that part doesn't have something really important and some real wisdom to share. To me, the part that's able to say, hey, I'm going to bail you out this time, but I'm pretty pissed right now because you're not showing up and you're not doing what you're supposed to be doing, is a part that has such good boundaries and is very, will call out accountability.
Right. And I just want to clarify that what you just said is not about you and I. It's about another relationship, in case any of you are thinking there's some subtext here that we're not telling you.
No. I don't know. I'm not us. That one was not us. That was coming out. I got a lot of stuff flying around in my life right now.
You do.
Sometimes when we talk, I'm just like, oh, yeah. No wonder I just want to crawl under a rock.
Yeah.
But yeah, I've got some big changes are afoot and lots of seismic kind of activity in my life. But no, that one, I was referring to something else, not us. We don't have that type of relationship. Yeah,
no.
Sorry about that.
No. I just wanted to clarify for the listeners that thought, oh, maybe there's something else going on that we're not talking about. But I think it's important to recognize those things. And this morning when we FaceTime, like, I just started out by just needing to sob about this stuff. And the other part that I want to talk about, and we talked about, do your parts need a voice? Because they do need to be heard too. And I want to be sensitive to that just because this is my wound. And one of your wounds is about disappointing people. And the reality is the universe is going to give you so many opportunities to work through that until it is less of an issue. I think whatever our core wounds are always going to be there. I don't think that they 100% go away, but I think instead of them knocking us out and having to create chaos, we learn to navigate them, but I don't think that they ever fully go away. With some things they may, but
I don't think so.
If your thing is disappointment, you're going to get lots of opportunities to practice disappointment. For me, I have this thing about not being seen and heard. And so that comes up for me. And if if I'm in a place where my life is feeling full and I'm fully in my life, it doesn't impact me as much. And right now, I don't feel like I'm very much in my life. And this is coming up for me all over the place.
Yeah. I mean, from a parts perspective, I think something that resonates with me, which is totally everything you just said with a slight, I guess, using parts language, is they don't go away. And the fullness, what you just said, that was beautiful. Can you say that again? Like when you're fully in your life and your life is full? That was beautiful.
Yeah. So normally I'm going to aquafit 2 to 3 times a week. I'm kayaking. I'm feeling engaged in my life. I'm out walking the dog. I'm independent. That's another thing. If we have time, we may do another episode. I do these things independently. Right now, I am not doing any of those things. It's like I'm here and I want to get back to there. And there is when I was fully integrated in my life. And I'm not fully in my life. And so I'm much more dependent and sensitive to the things that are going on around me because I'm not filling up my life with me feeling like I'm well taken care of. I'm not.
Yeah. Yeah. And just a gentle reminder that you will get back there. Your plant's dried out a little bit now. We just got to water it and you'll get back there, right?
Yeah.
Similar to that, it's being willing to be in relationship with these things, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think from a parts perspective, and when we talk about our psyche, right? So psycho-spiritual sense of things, it's being willing to be in relationship, whether it's with our wounds, which often show up as young parts of us back when we were wounded. There's a memory system there. That's why when we say think all those parts thoughts, feel all that parts feelings, we have that parts memories and perspectives and the sense, the meaning we made out of the world when something happened to us when we were 14, for instance, right? And old narratives that often don't serve us, often aren't a complete picture. You know, now that I'm a parent, I know so much more. You know, it's like all that stuff. But when you are fully taken over by a part, it's like all the other parts and all the other perspectives that you might have go to sleep. But it's what I'm trying to get at, what I'm trying to say, not eloquently today, is it's this willingness to be in relationship with your shadow, with your parts. Like, do they ever go away? I don't think so. Would we want them to? No, I actually don't think we want what we say we want a lot of the time. If we can be willing to lean in, to be curious, like you said, that's part of it. That's part of this. Somatically, it's usually an experience of openness and spaciousness as opposed to tension and right? And it's a willingness to be in relationship with those parts of us, with our shadow, with, if we're very perfectionistic, with the imperfect, right? If willing to be in relationship with the physics of life, right? Like impermanence, things that are just, we can fight with it all day long, but gravity is still going to happen. Aging is still going to happen. Loss is still going to happen. None of this ends well. And that's an invitation that can be joyous, not necessarily nihilistic. And that's the difference.
Right. And I don't know if this is true for everybody, but you had offered, I can go back and listen to that polo. And what happened is my PDA got kicked up this morning. So pathological demand avoidance or pervasive drive for autonomy, that I felt like I didn't have control, that I shared some pretty intimate things about things that were going on with you, that not with you, but with me, and not having that perceived, received, kicked up my PDA, a loss of control and autonomy. So not only did I delete the polo that I sent this morning because I was angry, and then I went into shame and was afraid you would get angry with me. And I didn't feel like I could tolerate that. I was afraid I'd lose a friendship while I'm feeling angry. So both, shame and anger. Then what I wanted to do, because I didn't feel like I had control, like I left you this long polo about all these things are going on. You didn't even see me and hear me. I wanted to delete it. That's my PDA. I don't have control. So I'm going to take something away from you so I feel like I have control and autonomy. I didn't, and we talked about it. And for me, I don't need you to listen to the polo. I just need the acknowledgement that you didn't respond. It's different for everybody. And this happened the other day. One of my sons is here, and he and my husband stopped by the store to pick up some things, but they picked up food for themselves. And they came home with food for themselves, and nobody asked if I wanted anything. And you and I were FaceTiming at the time, and I said, I'm going to text you. Of course, my husband and
Steve's ears perk up.
But I wanted to explain what was going on with me, since we were FaceTiming. So when we got off the phone, because I think my husband said, is everything okay? And I just kind of couldn't manage in the moment, but I was really hurt and angry. Like, you guys, I'm not driving. I'm not going out. You've been out all day. And I said to them also, when the boys come down, Steve centers himself around the boys. My other son, Josh, was down. They weren't planning to golf on Saturday. I suggested that they go and golf. I want Steve to be there for them. Steve loves being out. The boys love being out. I don't golf. So I said, I'm very, very generous about you spending time with the boys, but not feeling considered is really hurtful to me. It hurts my feelings. And what they focused on is, what do you want? We'll go get it. We'll get anything you want. I'm like, I'm not hungry, and it's not about the food, but it's about thinking of me and remembering. And it was very sweet for the next 2 days. I was like, Mom, what do you want? We'll get you whatever you want. You know, that they're trying to make up for it.
Well, that's why the feedback is so important, right? Because we can definitely course correct.
Yeah. But I think it's important to focus on, it's not so much about the food, it's about being acknowledged that, for me, that's what came up with you also. It's that same thing of, do I matter? Am I important? Do people see me?
So I am so curious, as a sidebar, about how technology is affecting us, right? And I'm trying to not come from a place of self-defensiveness, because I know how destructive that can get. But what I'm curious about is, like, we have this Polo channel. Let's call it a channel. It's not an actual channel. What I mean is like a method, right? It's a mode of communicating, where if decontextualized and we're just looking at polos, which we have some habits that we fall into, often like early morning polos kind of a thing, right? And expectations around that. And I'm wondering if there's a part of you that forgot or wasn't tuned into the FaceTiming we did the day before, where I did fail you today. I didn't follow the pattern, which is to get on, reflect the last polo. If I can't reflect it, I can't remember it, I at least speak to that and say, hey, if I'm missing something. So there's that. And I'm curious, because I know that there was time during some of our FaceTiming yesterday where we actually did talk about the things that were in the polo. I think. Maybe not. I could be wrong, because memory fails us.
We did
You don't
not.
think so?
No.
Okay.
But
I have to go back and listen to it now.
No, don't.
Even though
don't.
I want to honor that you want to delete it.
No. But I'm glad you brought this up, because this goes into my overfunctioning. And for you, I think that you could leave polos, and if I reflected a quarter of what you said, I think you would be fine with that. I don't think you have the expectation or the need to be reflected the way that I reflect you. And
I'm not allowed to have needs or expectations, which is another whole episode.
That's
and
another
problem.
episode. But I don't think that you have that expectation or that need, at least at this point in your life, where you acknowledge that. For me, it is most likely overfunctioning on my part. I own that 100%. That part of how I show love, because love to me is being reflected, that I'd say probably 85, 90% of the time when I listen to your polos, I make sure that I'm in a place where I can take notes or I can respond right away, because that to me is like how I show you that I love you. And I have another friend who will listen to polos while they're doing things, and then maybe they don't get back for a day and they just kind of say whatever they remember, so my polo for them is an entertainment that they use to fill up whatever their activity is, and then they respond with whatever they do. Where for me, it may be my overfunctioning, because this is how I show people that I love them. It's like your love language. By listening and making sure that I'm in a place where I can respond. Now, when you polo me during the day and I'm finishing up with a client and I'm doing notes, I am not very attentive and I don't respond very well. And that's a time when I use your polo as a way of kind of filling space, but I am not attentive. But I think it's important that we're talking about this, because we may be operating from very, very different frames of reference of what polo is, because you've talked about just use polo as a way to express and connect. And for me, I generally don't want to talk into a void that's not very satisfying, because my need for reflection tends to be pretty high. It just is.
Yeah. I mean, there are times when you'll reflect things back in a polo to me that I said that I forgot I even said by the time within the 24 hours or something.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh yeah, I was feeling that way, wasn't I?
Yeah.
I don't know. But I am curious about the technology though, and how we use it and the expectations around it. And I think this is its own way of leaning in and being just really curious. I know you're the only person right now I polo with. I know that you have a more sort of active polo life. No, not right now. Goes in and out.
Lost all of those friends except for one.
Oh.
Honestly.
Well, yeah. It's funny. We were talking a little bit about that today too, earlier, you and me, right? Just what are vibrational matches?
Yeah.
And to almost embrace the rejection sensitivity as like a good thing.
Yeah.
As I'm learning, because I want to build community in my life, but not everybody's a good fit.
Yeah. We need to wrap up because you have a client, but I do want to say something. You and I had talked about this at least a year ago when I was feeling like I just didn't have it in me to reflect. And you were saying, so don't reflect. And that I thought I'd lose the friendship. I thought you'd get mad because the way that I feel like I show that I care and give value is by reflecting what you have to say. And this was regarding polo. And you're like, don't even respond. And it was really, really hard because this is how I feel like I get my sense of value and self-worth is by listening and giving my insight and that was a really, really hard thing for me to do. And I just felt like I didn't have it in me.
Gosh, that self-worth thing is so tricky, isn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, I feel that. I mean, I'm not tearful about it right now, but I know my own self-worth wounds, right? And when that's such sacred ground, right? That's such like tender territory. And just all the ways in which it works out and shows up and puts pressure or tension on us. Like, if only, if this, then that, those are just that. I'm just kind of struck by that sense. And I'm not often here of the spaciousness around that just inherent worthiness, right? That just, there's so many ways to express it.
Yeah.
But it's like, pointing at the moon isn't the moon, right? Like there's a lot of ways that we can express that we matter or our sense of self-worth. And it is, period.
Yeah. Yeah. So for the listener, if, around Christmas, around picking out or Hanukkah or Kwanzaa or whatever it is that you celebrate, if you celebrate around holidays, birthdays, whatever that is finding the perfect gift, wrapping it the perfect way, writing Christmas cards or holiday cards or showing up on time or being mindful about people or coming up with activities or showing up so that you're engaging. Those are all ways that it can be our value system. It can also be how we hustle for our self-worth. Like I'm saying, like I'm intentional about listening and responding. And I probably overfunction in this area. And there are areas where it hurts me. Does it mean that me doing this is bad or wrong, or I shouldn't engage in this? No, but there are times like this morning where it activates something for me. And so if you work really hard to show people that you love them and care by preparing food, by watching their children, by cleaning the house, by making things, whatever that is that you do, and it's not reciprocated and that activates something for you, is this how you're trying to get a sense of value and self-worth, even if it's a very strong value of yours, and does it trip you up? Because that's kind of how this stuff gets messy, tricky.
Because I'm certain a year ago, my expressing that sentiment was meant for you, right? And that I just wanted you to show up. And if you couldn't reflect, that was okay. And I'm learning that because I would go dark. Like if I didn't feel like I could show up in a way that was, whatever you want to call it. I know I use the word hustle or overperforming a lot, and it's not performative, like it's sincere, but it all ties in with the masking stuff. It's like how we were trained to think we have to show up to be acceptable.
Right.
And I think, whether you're whether you're using the autism label or the HSP label, it's like all the efforts that we go through. A lot of times, if we really keep drilling down, it is about making sure that our self-worth is assured, and our self-worth is assured. And there's a million ways to express our own self-worth, and that being empath, especially that we feel and see the worth in others and how much they mean to us and how much they love us. I remember breaking, because of the gift thing, actually, that you bring that up. Oh gosh, gift giving was so stressful for me because I could never find like the perfect gift to represent how much I love this person or felt about this person. And once I I don't know why it took me so long, but once I was like, wait a minute, that's not possible. That's an impossible task that I'm really wringing myself out over. It became much easier. I was delighted in the little gift I gave you, and I thought it was really fun. And I've dropped this idea that it should represent perfectly how deeply I feel about you and your friendship.
Right. And thank you for the gift, by the way.
Hmm.
But yeah, we get really wrapped up in these things, and none of it is bad. I think just understanding all the different pieces that it plays and how much pressure we put on ourselves. And I can't tell you how many times throughout this holiday season, I feel like I'm not showing up enough and I've named it. And whoever I'm struggling with is like, no, it's fine. And I feel like I'm falling so short of the mark, but other people don't have these expectations that I have for myself. And the truth is, I don't have any more than I have. So even if it does upset somebody, like, I don't have it. I just don't. But other people aren't even expecting what I'm expecting from myself.
Yeah. Well, that's where parts are helpful, right?
Yeah.
Because we all have the part that wants the wish granting fairy, that all knowing and can just anticipate all of our needs.
Yeah.
And we can speak and chaperone and be willing to be in relationship with that part of us, then the parts that are maybe a little more reasonable about other people's limitations and our own
Right.
can be there.
Right. We need to wrap up. You have a client.
All right. Thanks for having me, my dear friend.
Thanks for being here today. Love you, Jen.
Love you. Bye.
Bye. Hey again. So where do you overfunction? Where do you overperform? I think we often have a lot of pride around the areas where we show up and we're efficient, and we get lots of praise for how effective and on time and perfect gift giver or friend or whatever those things are. And it's not that those strengths are not real, but is it possible that there's some overfunctioning going on there? And does it cause you grief? And for me, it causes autistic burnout. If you don't identify as being autistic, then you might get tired, you might get depressed, you may feel depleted. Does it happen to you? And I think that that's the risk of when we overperform and overfunction, and we don't even know that we're doing it. I mean, I just got diagnosed autistic at 60. So I had a lot of years of showing up and functioning in a way that I don't think always honored me, because I looked around and it looked like everybody else was doing it. And I figured I was supposed to also, and felt inadequate when I couldn't, but didn't understand why I couldn't and thought I wasn't trying hard enough. So I just tried even harder, which I don't think really worked for me. So are there things that maybe you want to take a look at? And if not, that's okay too. If it's working for you for now, then no need to change anything. If any of this resonates for you, if you want some extra support, you can reach out to Jen at jen@heartfulnessconsulting.com. I think she's got some room for clients. I think I have a little bit of room. You can reach out to me at unapologeticallysensitive.com. There's a form on my website you can fill out if you want to do a free 20-minute consult, see if we're a good fit or not. I think these things are so relatable. Having somebody that understands it's neurodivergent, that's wired like you are, makes all the difference in the world. So we would love to support you, see you thrive as a neurodivergent person. If you're autistic, ADHD, PDA, RSD. I used to say the trifecta. So is it the quadfecta? I've got them all. Anyways, I hope you're doing well. Remember, sensitivity is nothing to apologize for. It's how your brain is wired. You have a right to have needs. You have a right to get your feelings hurt. You have a right to be disappointed. You have a right to be defensive. You have a right to cry. You have a right to be sad. You have a right to feel like you're not fitting in your own life right now and that you want to get back to where you were before, or get to a place where you haven't been. And how do you get from here to there? It's okay to take baby steps. It's okay to need support. It's okay to hate that you need support. That's where I'm at right now. We're going to have a lot of time to talk about everything today, so I may do an extra episode about that. You have a right to have joy, to feel satisfied, to feel fulfilled and connected, to be stimmy, to talk about the things that you love, to info dump, to be fascinated with lots of things that maybe not everybody in your life is fascinated with. You have a right to fully be you, to feel deeply, to think deeply, to be empathic, to love nature and animals, to feel bored, to feel understimulated, to feel overstimulated. Everything that's going on with you is really okay. And if it's possible to have self-compassion, great. And if not, I'm struggling with that right now. And I'm blessed to have people in my lives that are reflecting back to me the challenge that I'm having with my own self-compassion. It's just where I'm at. I think that's it. Have a blessed day.